Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I will be recommending books that I believe are perfect to read during this Christmas season. I know it's not quite December yet, but I did want to get this video out in case you want to plan, in case you need time to figure out what you're interested in reading, just to give you guys time to collect your list of books that you'd like to read in December. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about each book, but I will give you a few pointers as to why I think they're perfect to read in December around the Christmas season. And I'm just going to go ahead and get started with some romance/contemporary books. First up, we have Christmas Shopaholic by Sophie Kinsella. This book was one of my favorite books from this year. I absolutely loved it. It's absolutely hilarious. If you're looking for something really funny and lighthearted, this is the perfect Christmas read. We have our main character, Becky, who so much is thrown on her last minute in terms of preparing for the Christmas holidays. Normally her parents host Christmas, but this year she is forced to, and everyone has their own demands, and so she's really overwhelmed. She also has a shopping addiction, which is really, really interesting, and I think the author did a good job with that aspect of the story. And honestly, I just found Becky to be such an endearing character. Every character in this book was so well drawn out. It is part of a series, but I haven't read any other books in the series, and I was completely fine jumping into this one, so I think it's completely fine if you haven't read any of the other books in this series. This book is just so much fun. Like, it's the perfect cozy rom-com to just sit down with by the Christmas tree and just have a great time with. I would highly recommend this if you haven't read it yet. Next up, we have The Christmas Bookshop. I did really enjoy this book. I think I gave it 3 stars. I overall had a good time reading it. It is set in Scotland, which I love. It was very cozy, and it does feature a bookshop with this elderly man who can't really seem to keep his bookshop afloat. And then there's this younger Scottish woman who has to move from her old town to where her sister lives. She has her own baggage, she has her own issues, and so she moves to this town and is kind of forced into working at this bookshop, and the relationship that she develops with the elderly owner is very sweet. It is a very sweet story and a great Christmas read as well. Next is a book that I read in October and absolutely loved it, and that is The Santa Suit. You would have heard me talk about it in my wrap-up, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this book, but it's another very short, fun, just what you'd expect out of a Christmas romance. It's very cute. It's not something I normally gravitate towards, but because it's Christmassy and it just had all those vibes I was looking for, I was pretty happy with the book. It is a little cheesy, but sometimes Christmas is the best time to just, you know, read a cheesy book, try to enjoy it as best as you can, and just have a good time. So that's kind of the attitude I went into it with, and I really enjoyed it. Next, we have a book that I haven't really talked about too much, and that is Winter Solstice by Rosamund Pilcher. This is actually the only Rosamund Pilcher book that I've read, but I really enjoyed it. And it does only feature Christmas towards the end of the book, but I feel like the characters and the atmosphere that the author created in this story is perfect to read in the weeks that are leading up to Christmas. Yeah, I would definitely recommend if you are looking for a slower paced, I guess more character-driven story. It's about a woman named Elfrida who is retired, and she ends up moving to a small village, and it's just so cozy. You have those small town vibes in England, and it's a beautiful story. You have multiple perspectives, different characters that end up coming together and end up living in this house, this very old house. At first you wonder, how are all of these characters' lives going to intertwine, because you have their separate perspectives. They're all on very different life paths, but they end up together, and then they end up spending Christmas together, and it is a beautiful story. It is character driven. You're very much looking at each character's mental health and past and everything, but it is a very beautiful story. If you are looking for something a little slower and just more calm and heartfelt, I would definitely recommend. Next, I have 2 mysteries to share with you. First off, we have Hercule Poirot's Christmas, and I love what it says here on the back. It says, "The holidays are anything but merry when a family reunion is marred by murder, and the brilliant Belgian investigator is quickly on the case." And so this basically involves a murder that happens on Christmas Eve at Gorston Hall, and Hercule Poirot is there, and he has to solve the mystery, and it is very fun. And I think it's the only Agatha Christie book that features Christmas, which I'm kind of sad about, but it's a really good one. Then we have another book that I read in October, and that is Apple Cider Slaying. And again, this book, I loved it so much. This is probably going to be one of my favorite cozy mystery books of all time. I just loved it. It was exactly what I was expecting but it delivered so much more in the cozy and festive vibes. It's mostly set in November, so it's like the time between the Thanksgiving festivities and the Christmas festivities. And as you can see by the title, they have started setting up for Christmas, and it is just so, so cozy, so festive. And yeah, it involves murder, it involves apple cider recipes, and it's just so perfect for this time of year. Next, I will be sharing some middle grade books as well as one YA fantasy book. And the first one is Peril at Owl Park. This is book 2 in the Eggie Morton series. If you haven't heard of the Eggie Morton series, it's basically a middle grade mystery series that features 2 young children. One of them is a girl named Eggie Morton, and her name is a twist on Agatha Christie. And then we have her friend Hector Poirot, which is a twist on Hercule Poirot. So it's very much an ode to Agatha Christie. This book is the second book in a series, but I do think it's okay to read it without having read the first book. It just might spoil some of the mysteries from the first one, but it is middle grade. It's just so much fun, and it's perfect to read during Christmas. This actually, I think, takes place on Christmas Eve, actually Christmas morning. So it says, Eggie clings to festive cheer despite her sister's glowering mother-in-law, an attempted burglary, and a blizzard that keeps everyone inside. But when she and her friends discover a body instead of presents on Christmas morning, things take a deadly serious turn. Eggie and Hector will once again put their deductive skills and imaginations to work in finding a murderer on the loose. And maybe this time the local police will have a keener appreciation of Eggie's theories. This is such a cute series. I've read the first 2 books and I have the third one, but just haven't read it yet. But I love how the author has illustrations of all the characters. But yeah, this book is just perfect for Christmas. It is set on Christmas morning, so a very, very cozy and fun middle grade mystery book. Next, we also have Winter House, and this is a really cute middle grade that is also set around the Christmas season. And this one says, orphan Elizabeth Summer's malevolent aunt and uncle ship her off to the ominous Winter House Hotel, owned by the peculiar Norbridge Falls. Upon arrival, Elizabeth quickly discovers that Winter House has many charms, most notably its massive library. It's not long before she locates a magical book of puzzles that will unlock a mystery involving Norbridge and his sinister family. But the deeper she delves into the hotel's secrets, the more Elizabeth starts to realize that she is somehow connected to Winter House. As fate would have it, Elizabeth is the only person who can break the hotel's curse and solve the mystery. But will it be at the cost of losing the people she has come to care for and even Winter House itself? Mystery, adventure, and beautiful writing combine in this exciting novel richly set in a hotel full of secrets. This is another very cozy mystery book, and I really, really enjoyed it, and I would highly recommend for the Christmas season. And another middle grade that kind of has mystery and fantasy elements is Green Glass House by Kate Milford. This is a very, very fun and cozy book. It is set in this hotel as well, just like Winter House. It also has some really, really fun characters, and I'll read the back for this as well because it has been a while. But it says, it's wintertime at Green Glass House. The creaky Smuggler's Inn is always quiet during this season, and 12-year-old Milo, the innkeeper's adopted son, plans to spend his holidays relaxing. But on the first icy night of vacation, out of nowhere, the guest bell rings. Then rings again, and again. Soon, Milo's home is bursting with odd, secretive guests, each one bearing a strange story that is somehow connected to the rambling old house. As objects go missing and tempers flare, Milo and Meddy, the cook's daughter, must decipher clues and untangle the web of deepening mysteries to discover the truth about Green Glass House and themselves. It's similar to Eggie Morton in the sense that you have a young boy and a young girl, and they're trying to solve a mystery together, and it's very, very cozy, very fun. Would highly recommend. Next up, I'd like to recommend A Soul as Cold as Frost. This is the first book in the Winter Souls trilogy by Jennifer Croft, and oh my goodness, this book is so atmospheric. It gives off Narnia vibes and the Polar Express and the Nutcracker, and it's just so deliciously Christmas. This book is so atmospheric. This is tagged as Christian fiction, and I think it's because the author used faith elements in the story itself, but it's very much fantasy, very unique, and it just has such beautiful writing. It's not a perfect book. There are certain things that I didn't like too much about it, but it is perfect to read in December. It's very, very atmospheric. It also has a pretty complicated plot, so I will go to Goodreads and read the summary. So it says, Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good fright. The quarrel of sword and bone was a death sentence for anyone who stepped into the arena with the deranged queen, whose soul had crisped to frost in an age long since past. 16-year-old Helen Bell understood tragedy better than most kids growing up. She knew what it was like to wear clothes from donation bins and be mocked by the beautiful girls in high school. She thought those brutal experiences made her ready for anything, but she wasn't ready for this. After an eccentric girl opens Helen's eyes to let her see the realm of winter, a world with intersects tucked carefully into the cracks of our own, where monarchs have risen and fallen, it's forbidden to mention the name of the dead king, and the currency is gold rings, Helen discovers things are far from ordinary in winter. After trying to deny the existence of a disrupting train horn ringing in her ears for days, Helen receives a mysterious summons from a group who calls themselves the Crimson Court to enter the Quarrel of Sword and Bone. This is a traditional duel performed before 1,000 witnesses that leaves only one survivor, and she's forced to finally pay attention to the handsome boy who's been following her around with a warning on his tongue. When the arrival of wicked villains propels Helen into the heart of winter, where there's no going back, she finds herself being pursued by something else too, a whispered prayer battling on her behalf, and an ancient truth that breathes living words of wisdom, the very wisdom forgotten by the Rhyme folk when their disunity drove them to draw lines in the snow in an age of the past. Helen must find a way out, or she'll be dragged into the arena to face the Crooked Queen head-on before a crowd ready to watch her die. The Winter Souls series blends action and warm Christmas traditions, bringing the old forgotten tales of the season to life with new and grittier versions of famous characters out of old holiday legends, folklore, and myths, such as St. Nicholas, the Snow Queen, Scrooge, and the Nutcracker. Like I said, this book is so atmospheric, and I know I use that word a lot, but it's the best word to describe what it feels like reading it. And I have a little blurb here. It is basically a quote where a character was listing some of the very interesting sounding drinks and food, but it just encompasses the writing of the story and the descriptions and everything, and it makes them feel very tangible almost. So we have ground pine dust cocoa, lumber dark brew, white forest ginger and bean blend, northern spicebush twig tea, black glacier pie, crispy toast with juniper berry spread, ice berry pudding, dark chocolate beans with sweet spices, and hints of sugary orange and creamy licorice. But yeah, it's just such a fun story, and Helen is trying to figure out what on earth she has to do because of this evil queen, and her name is Mara Rouge, which was also a really interesting name, and there's just so much in this story, so many elements that make it very, very cozy and perfect for Christmas. Next, I wanted to mention some shorter stories or picture books if you are interested, and one of my favorites would be The Season of Light. I talked about this in, I think, my September wrap-up, and it's one of my favorite picture books now. I absolutely loved it. I would highly, highly recommend. It made me remember what Christmas meant to me as a child, and it was just so, so precious. And another picture book I would say is The Night Before Christmas, very, very classic. It's so, so cute, and there are many different editions of it with different illustration styles, but it's definitely a favorite as well. Next, we have a very, very short story. It's very, very cute, and I'd actually never heard about it, but my sister just found it at a thrift store, got it, not really thinking much of it, and then I read it, and I found it very, very sweet. And that is The Tree That Nobody Wanted. I actually don't have a dust jacket for it, but it's a very, very cute story, and it's actually a lot more heartwarming than I was expecting. I'm just gonna read the first couple paragraphs. It's so, so sweet. So it says, "There are things poor people know that others do not. All kinds of things. The list is very long and I don't know them all, but I do know some of them. One thing poor people know is that at 8 o'clock on Christmas Eve, all over the world, the men who sell Christmas trees simply walk off their rented spaces and begin their own Christmas celebrations. They just leave behind the unsold Christmas trees. Some years, there are a great many trees left. Other years, just a few. After the sellers leave, people who didn't have enough money to buy a tree earlier pick over what is left. Some years, they get a good tree. Some years, a not so good tree. And some years, they can't find a tree at all. The year was 1946, 1 year after the end of World War II. The place was the Brownsville section of Brooklyn, where I was born 11 years earlier. It was a bad neighborhood when I lived there. It's a lot worse now. Some very poor people still live there, and there is more violence there now than there ever was in 1946. For reasons I'll explain later, I lived with my grandmother, my mother's mother, and our canary, Sweetie, in a 2-room apartment on the 3rd floor. We lived in what was called a cold water flat because it had no hot water and no central heating. It was cold in winter and hot in summer. And then it just goes on describing what the apartment was like and how difficult it was living right where a train would go by every day. And yeah, it's told from the perspective of an 11-year-old boy who lives in poverty with his grandmother. And the story basically centers around this very scraggy and just not beautiful Christmas tree that he picks out. And he picks this tree out because it calls to him. He considers it to be, you know, ugly and just not beautiful, but something about that tree calls to him, and he picks it out from all of the other trees that are left over after the tree seller has gone. And very, very heartwarming, very, very sweet. I would highly, highly recommend. If you're also looking for a fairy tale that kind of feels Christmassy, I would also recommend 2 stories by Hans Christian Andersen. First is The Fir Tree, and as you can tell by the title, it's about a fir tree, and it's definitely, I think, one of his most Christmassy stories. And then The Snow Queen as well. This is one of my favorite fairy tales. It's not Christmassy in and of itself, but if you are looking for, I guess, a more wintry and snowy short story to read around Christmas, I would definitely recommend. All right, moving on to classics, which is the last category I have here. First, we have Letters from Father Christmas by J.R.R. Tolkien. Oh my gosh, I did talk about this in my October wrap up, but wow, this collection of letters. Just imagine one of your parents deciding to write a letter to you from Santa Claus every year for Christmas, and you're a young child and you believe Santa Claus exists, and it's just the most precious thing. And the fact that he even included illustrations, just, oh my gosh, like look at this. Just beautiful. And what I love is that it actually has pictures of the original letters that he wrote, but then it has them in like easier to read font. So just as an example. But yeah, this book melted my heart. Absolutely love it so, so much. It is perfect to read during this season. You feel like you're actually getting letters from Santa, and it's just so, so precious. I, of course, have to mention A Christmas Carol and the other Christmas stories in this collection by Charles Dickens. So we have A Christmas Carol, The Chimes, and The Cricket on the Hearth. I haven't actually read The Chimes yet, but I have read The Cricket on the Hearth. It wasn't my favorite, so I would definitely say A Christmas Carol is the best. I love it so, so much. If you don't know what A Christmas Carol is about, we have a man named Scrooge. He hates everything. He hates Christmas. He just doesn't like life. And he's visited by 3 ghosts: the ghost of Christmas present, the ghost of Christmas past, and the ghost of the future Christmases that are to come. And yeah, it's just a very eye-opening experience for Scrooge. And yeah, this is just so, so precious. If you haven't read A Christmas Carol, I would recommend trying it out this December. I also have to mention Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. This has a very, very classic opening chapter, and it is set during Christmas. And it's just so, so precious. It's not like the entire book goes through many, many years. It's not just about Christmas, but I just feel that this book is Christmassy. As a book, as a story, there's just something about it that reading it in December around the Christmas holidays, it's just the perfect time in my opinion. And yeah, Little Women, if you don't know what it's about, we have the 4 March sisters, and their lives all have very unique trajectories, and they all have their own battles and struggles, and it's such a beautiful story. And oh my gosh, you need to read it if you haven't read it yet, and I would recommend reading it in December. I think it's the perfect month to read this book. Next, I have an entire series I would like to recommend to read in December. Obviously, you don't have to read each book. I will mention the particular books that I feel are the most Christmassy. But we have the Little House on the Prairie series, and I'm mainly mentioning this just because of how cozy these books are. Even if you haven't grown up watching Little House or reading the books, you still feel so nostalgic reading these books. And a few of them in particular have very, very precious Christmas chapters that I just can't get enough of, and I'm probably going to reread them this December. And I think it's Little House in the Big Woods that has one of my favorite Christmas scenes, as well as Little House on the Prairie and The Long Winter, and I feel like a couple other books probably have Christmas scenes as well, probably Farmer Boy. But while I do think reading these books in order is, you know, it makes sense to do that. If you feel the desire to just read one of them, honestly, any of them that has a Christmas chapter in it is perfect for December. Speaking of the Little House series, my friend Kate over on the channel Kate How, she actually has a few videos where she's read the Christmas chapters from, I think, 1 or 2 of these books, and I will link those videos down below if you just want to hear the Christmas chapter. She made those videos so, so atmospheric, and I think she's done some other Christmas stories as well, so I will link a few of them below. They are just so, so heartwarming and make you feel so nostalgic. And yeah, she nailed it. She has like fireplace sounds, and it's just beautiful. So would highly recommend those videos. But that is the Little House series. And last but not least, this is my favorite Christmas story ever. It is The Nutcracker by E.T.A. Hoffmann. This is the original Nutcracker story that Tchaikovsky based his ballet off of. So this is the original story, the source material. This story, so precious. Before I read this book, I actually thought that the main girl who receives the Nutcracker, her name is Clara, but that's just in the Barbie Nutcracker. In the original, her name is Marie. So in the story, Marie receives a Nutcracker for Christmas, and she has a godfather named Drosselmeyer. And oh my gosh, this book, she's whisked away to a magical winter wonderland. This is amazing. If you haven't read it, please do so. It's so, so good. All right, so that is my list of Christmas recommendations. I hope that at least one of these books sounds like something that you'd be interested in reading this Christmas. If you have read any of these books, please let me know what your thoughts were in the comments. If you do end up picking any of these books up in December, let me know as well, because I'd love to chat about them. And that's it for this video. Thank you all so, so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in my next one. Bye.